Evening, everyone. Welcome to this meeting for Corporate Services and Cost of Living Scrutiny Board. Any apologies? I'm not aware of any. Item 2, late items. Again, not aware of any late items. Item 3, declarations of interest. Nope. Item 4, minutes held on the last meeting. Everyone, yep, thank you. Everyone happy? Item 5, minute extract from exec scrutiny board. So this was a matter to do with the forward plan and a key decision about adding something to our work programme, but I'm told it's already been on our work programme. It's relating to AI, which is something that we've already covered once and we'll be covering again. Item 6, so our one and only item on the agenda tonight. We were due to have 2, but the other items moved to the following meeting. So item 6 is on the councillor casework portal, which Alex, you'll be delivering for us.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm here to discuss with the board this evening the councillor portal. So thank you for inviting me to speak and for adding it to your work programme. As part of the meeting this evening, planning to provide an overview of the councillor portal for those councillors who might not have used it as frequently as others, and just set out what it seeks to achieve, why it was introduced around 12 months ago, and some reflections on its first year in operation. So, as I said, for those of you who haven't used the system previously, I will provide some basic overview of its functionality, but hopefully most of you will be aware of, at its core, what it's there to do. I want to talk to you a little bit about how we intend to improve the portal, both in the short and the long term. It is very much an iterative process. It's a new system that we have introduced, and we want to work with councillors to improve it and to make it more user-friendly for all of you. So, with that in mind, it's really about maximising the benefit of a new system to ensure that it achieves what you want it to achieve as councillors, but also that it achieves some organisational benefits for the council as well in terms of how we can operate as efficiently as possible. So, in a nutshell, what is the councillor portal? It's an online tool that has been developed in-house by colleagues in digital services working with democratic services and councillors over a series of years to help you raise, manage and respond to casework that has been raised with you by your residents, and it allows you to do that either via your phone when you're out and about in your wards or from a desktop device. What we want it to be is a quick and easy way to ensure casework is allocated to the most appropriate service within the council for any given issue. So sometimes that's not immediately obvious where a particular type of issue sits within the council's operational structure. For officers, sometimes we live and breathe the management structure of the council on a daily basis, but that's not necessarily immediately apparent for councillors. Structures of the council change regularly, individual officers come and go from the authority, and what this system is intended to do is a means to avoid duplication and inefficiency. So each councillor generates their own caseload, and that will vary from councillor to councillor, from area to area. But when you multiply that up 51 times across the council, it can generate quite a large volume of work within the organisation. And quite often that's generated via emails, phone calls, etc. And we think that for straightforward transactional pieces of casework, email and phone call isn't necessarily the most efficient way of dealing with some of those queries. Another benefit that we see to the councillor portal is that the councillor officer protocol, which is a document that is monitored by the Standards Committee and adopted by the full council, that includes corporately agreed timescales for the resolution of inquiries from councillors. So for those of you who aren't aware, officers should respond to an inquiry from a councillor. They should acknowledge that inquiry within 2 working days of receipt, and for straightforward inquiries, it should look to be resolved within 5 working days. Some cases will take longer than that, naturally, but beyond that 5 working day target, there should be regular updates provided to the councillor. So within the councillor portal, those timelines and targets are built in, and the teams who are dealing with queries raised through the portal will get automated reminders when cases are assigned to them and as they approach those targets. As I mentioned earlier on this slide, we see it as a tool for straightforward transactional types of casework. It will never be a replacement for those kind of thorny issues which really requires a counsellor to get into the detail of an issue that might require you to coordinate a response across several different services within the council. But we hope that by creating a system that is as efficient as possible for dealing with those more straightforward queries, it will free up more of your time to deal with that added value work, and similarly free up more time of the officers who are employed to support you, whether that's corporately within the council and civic support team or maybe within your localities teams in your wards. I think at this stage it's important to emphasise what the councillor portal is not as well. As I said, there will always be a role for the councillor and civic support team, or what traditionally known as member services, or the localities teams, to support you with those issues that can't necessarily be resolved easily, and to signpost you to the most appropriate colleagues when raising something through the portal isn't necessarily appropriate. This is stated on the front page of the councillor portal, but it's also not a means for reporting really urgent issues such as safeguarding concerns or danger to life or property. There are dedicated processes within the council for raising out-of-hours concerns of those kind of things, and the portal isn't appropriate for that type of thing. At this moment in time, it's also not being used to deal with inquiries related to Derby Homes, but we are in discussions with Derby Homes about potentially extending it once we get the councillor portal to a place that we're entirely comfortable with. And last but by no means least, I hope no one would think this, but it's important that I say it, it's not a means of checking up on councillors either, or monitoring caseloads in any way. Completely accept that councillors choose to go about their roles differently. You all approach your ward work in a different way. But what we want the portal to be is something that makes your roles easier. And also, should you want it, to provide you with some valuable data and insight about the kind of issues that are coming up within your areas. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as I move through the presentation. But before I do that, I just want to take the opportunity to go through the look and feel of the portal for those of you who haven't necessarily used it previously. So on the next slide, you'll see a screenshot of an early stage within the councillor portal. The look and feel of the system very much replicates the customer portal that residents in Derby use to raise issues online with the council. And it's in fact built on the same software platform as that system. One of the key principles of the councillor portal is that cases are raised by issue rather than service. So you would select the category and then issue that best fits the type of case that you're raising. So it doesn't require you to know which particular service within the council or which particular directorate deals with a given issue. And it comes back to that point I made earlier on, where those kind of roles and responsibilities change quite frequently within the council. There is always a restructure or a change in management structure, and sometimes issues and responsibilities move around. And clearly, it's not one of your responsibilities to memorise every single change that takes place within the council. And the idea here is that you raise cases via the issue, and it will always be allocated to the most appropriate team closest to the point of service delivery who can deal with that for you. Once you've selected your issue, the portal then asks you a series of questions about how you might want to deal with a particular case. For example, is it an issue that you've spotted yourself within your ward, or are you dealing with it specifically on behalf of a member of the public? Or is it related to a specific address within your ward, or just a general location? So it hopefully tries to capture some of those nuances and recognise that you're not necessarily always acting on behalf of a resident. It might just be something that you've picked up yourself. As you go through the process of raising a case in the portal, it asks you whether you want to add interested parties. So these could be residents that you want to keep updated, or other stakeholders within your ward. And these are also the people you can choose to notify once a case has been raised within the system and when you have secured a resolution on their behalf. So these interested parties, you add their details into the system, and importantly, it also prompts you with some questions around consent and data protection, protecting you as councillors in terms of your role as data controllers. As I mentioned earlier, in this example, we can see that the issue isn't associated with a particular address, and is instead about a location within Oakwood Park. So in these circumstances, the portal allows you to pinpoint a location of the issue on a map that will then tell the service exactly where that issue is. The next step then allows you to upload supplementary evidence, such as photographs, videos, or emails, for example. And then you can also select how you would like to be kept updated with the progress of a case, and whether you wish to share those details with your ward colleagues. Now, I know in some wards, councillors work very closely together and share details of casework. In others, that's not necessarily appropriate. So the portal allows you to do that should you want to. And before a case is raised with the service, you're given an opportunity to notify your interested parties or the residents who might have an interest in a case. So the default within the portal is via email, but you can also use the system to generate a PDF letter on your letterhead. We have got some issues with the formatting of those letters at the moment that we're working through, and I'll come on to that a bit more in a moment. But that functionality is there if you're dealing with someone who doesn't necessarily want to communicate via email. The case is then allocated to a service, and then when they respond with an update about their case, you'll be notified. If you're satisfied with the response that the service provides, you can then choose to communicate the outcome to the resident in the same way that you notified them initially. Or otherwise, you can either send it back to the service for more detail, or you can request more information or escalate a matter to a service director if you're really not happy with the outcome that's been provided. There's more information about using the portal on the council's intranet, and I'll mention that a bit more towards the end of the presentation about information that councillors can access around using the councillor portal. So in terms of some additional benefits that we envisage with the portal, the intention is that it makes it easier for you to share information with residents, colleagues and other interested parties. It gives you access to data and reporting about the type and frequency of issues raised within your wards, as well as managing issues around data protection and information governance. So councillors are all registered as individual data controllers with the Information Commissioner for the purposes of dealing with your personal casework. So you do have legal responsibilities around how you manage personal data. And using the portal, it does prompt you with some questions around how consent was obtained to act on behalf of residents and that kind of thing. So it does protect you in that respect. Some of my notes appear to have disappeared. Bear with me. So in terms of the that last point on the slide, there is a corporate sort of imperative around why we should be introducing the councillor portal and how we handle the casework when it's multiplied up across 51 different councillors. So over the last 15 years, the size of the council has reduced significantly. The number of officers that are available to support you in your role has reduced significantly as well. But in that time, the number of councillors hasn't changed. We had a boundary review, the number of councillors stayed the same. And I think in many cases, anecdotally, this isn't not based on any hard evidence, but speaking to councillors, I get the sense that caseloads have perhaps increased over that period as well. So with cost of living crisis, reductions in public services, the volume of issues that residents are coming to councillors about has perhaps increased. And so I think there is an inherent tension there between a shrinking organisation and actually an ever-increasing and valuable role of local councillors. So I think we have a responsibility to find more efficient ways of supporting you and dealing with casework in a way that is appropriate for the organisation in this day and age. So I've touched on that a little bit more on this next slide, but the portal has been designed and specified with councillors in mind. So there are several councillors who participated in the user group whilst the portal was under development. A lot of that work actually took place prior to the pandemic, and then it was put on hold for around 18 months actually, whilst we responded to the pandemic and other priorities took hold. And then we were able to make it operational around 12 months ago. There are very similar pieces of software, off-the-shelf pieces of software available to purchase for local authorities, but they're at considerable cost, and the ability to shape the system to our particular needs is lost sometimes when you're using proprietary software. And as I mentioned, it's built on the same software platform as the council's customer management system, and actually we have a lot of in-house expertise within digital services in terms of our programmers who can work with the portal to adjust it and change it to meet your particular needs. And as a bespoke system, it means that we can continue to develop and tweak the system as time moves on. As I said, it's an iterative process, and we really want to learn from councillors what works well and what doesn't work so well within the system, because it's not perfect at this moment in time. As I mentioned earlier, there are real opportunities I see for providing insight and data to councillors derived from information that is collected within the portal. And again, that is in development at the moment, and in fact, Jodie and I saw an example of what that could look like at a meeting with our IT colleagues earlier today. But For example, if you are regularly using the portal, it is theoretically possible to draw information down from the system that tells you about patterns or trends emerging about particular types of casework, or if there is any specific issues that are commonly occurring within particular areas of your ward. And I accept that, as most councillors will know that already, you'll have a sense of those issues that are really affecting your residents, but sometimes it might be useful for you to have that data to hand. And again, there is that organisational benefit, so around that tension between a reducing organisation and actually increased levels of casework. And finally, it has to be viewed in this sort of context of MTFP savings that have been approved by the council in recent years. So, for example, in the most recent budget rounds, the councillor and civic support team lost two full-time equivalent posts that would otherwise be there for supporting councillors and supporting civic services as well. And clearly, with fewer offices available, we have to find ways to be a bit more efficient in how we support you as councillors. And the same can be said across almost every service in the council. And I think we need to work collectively as a member and officer cohort to find new ways of working, embracing new forms of technology. So as I mentioned, it's been 12 months in operation, the councillor portal, and the figures on this slide here are taken from the 1st of January of this year. But our initial target was to have 40% of councillors regularly using the portal within its first year of operation. So we knew that actually this system wouldn't be suitable for everyone. Not everyone is as comfortable with this type of technology as others, and we want to support as many councillors as possible to use it, but we knew that it wouldn't be a case of having 100% of councillors using the system. Since the 1st of January, there have been 583 cases dealt with via the councillor portal, and 80% of councillors have raised at least one case in the system. And of those, around 30% have raised more than 10 cases. And in fact, the most active user in the system has raised well over 100 cases. So there are some councillors who are using the councillor portal and getting on with it quite well. However, we recognise that there are some councillors who've tried it and decided it maybe isn't for them. And we want to know what can we do to make that system more user-friendly. And as I said, as part of this annual review, we're asking ourselves some questions about how we encourage more councillors to use the portal as a matter of routine. So we'd like to collect feedback from as many frequent users as possible, and eager to hear the views of those who've tried the portal and decided not to pursue it further. Picking up a range of sort of different factors and feedback from councillors. So first of all, the time to raise a case within the portal. So the portal will never necessarily be as efficient as sending a single email or phoning a named officer to resolve a particular issue. But what it does mean, it means that a case can be allocated directly to the most appropriate service. So sometimes when a councillor picks up the phone to an officer, it might not necessarily be the most appropriate person to deal with an issue, and behind that, that officer might not necessarily know who within the council should be dealing with it. So behind that sits a series of phone calls or emails just to get the case to the right place before it can be resolved. So that creates a bit of a cottage industry within the council, I would say, and this system is designed to eliminate all of that. I would say that raising a straightforward case within the portal should take no more than 3 or 4 minutes. Clearly there are some cases that require a lot more input or require you to upload a little bit more information. But for the most straightforward cases, we're talking 3 or 4 minutes. But accept that that's not necessarily as quick as picking up a phone call. But I think organisationally it offers some benefits to the council. Time to receive responses as well. I think that might be maybe a factor. And that's something where the councillor support team can help councillors. We routinely monitor the portal so we can see cases that are raised within the system from any councillor. And those cases that are overdue are flagged within the system. And then colleagues who work in the councillor support team can then chase up any given service to say, actually, do you know Councillor X has this case? It should have been responded to 24 hours ago. Can you provide an update? And where we identify patterns or trends, or there are particular services that maybe aren't meeting those corporate targets, we're proactively intervening in those services and just saying, can we tighten up your processes? Can we offer you some more training in terms of how to use the portal, how to respond to cases? Support and training for councillors may also be an issue. We have got some really good resources available online via the Democratic Services SharePoint site, but we can provide some direct links to those as well to councillors. But included on there are step-by-step videos that show you how to raise a case, how to respond to a case, and give you a good overview of how the system is intended to work, and touches on many of the things that I've talked about already in this presentation. And then also that we will offer one-to-one support to any councillor who approaches the councillor support team. So if either yourselves or your colleagues want a bit of a guided tutorial on how to use the portal, then Jodie, who is our Councillor and Civic Support Manager, working with our IT colleagues, will sit down with you and just go through the system and make sure that you're as comfortable with it as possible. And then I think the final issue is around layout and design. I personally think that the layout and design of the process for raising a case is relatively straightforward and easy to use. However, we know there are issues around the overview of when maybe you have 7 or 8 cases raised in the system at any one time, what the information you see in terms of the summary page and differentiating between the cases is a little bit confusing, I think it's safe to say. And we've escalated that with digital services, and we're working on a fix at this moment in time, and hopefully we can provide an update within a couple of weeks on that in terms of what we can do to make that page more accessible. And one piece of feedback that I think would be useful from councillors, not just yourselves, but all councillors, would be on that summary page, what types of information do you want to see pulled through from your cases that would help you in terms of managing your caseload as a whole rather than just as individual cases. So as an example of that, this slide shows the My Requests tab, and this is what you see when you have several cases raised within the system. Feels very much like a sort of back-end page, and I think what we would like it to be is a bit more informative for councillors, to allow you to differentiate between different cases, different types of issues, and similarly have a more powerful search feature as well. So they're things that we're working with digital services, but if you have particular feedback or comments on that area, then we'd be really eager to hear about it. We have fortnightly meetings with our IT services colleagues on the councillor portal to address sort of short-term issues or tweaks or glitches within the system. For example, things that have been raised recently is the ability to add more information to a case after you've raised it. That's something that we're looking to add in. Improving the functionality and layout of the mobile version of the councillor portal as well. I think there are a few instances of when certain options are clicked, then the layout of the page isn't necessarily as good as it could be. And improving formatting issues with PDF letters as well, generated by the system. So that was something I mentioned earlier on about when you're responding to residents via letter, making sure that those automated letters are laid out in a way that looks nice and professional. As I said, councillors' feedback is really useful for us, and it's always prioritised in terms of short-term improvements to the system. And the more it is used, the more feedback that is provided, the better the system will ultimately become. And equally, we're working closely with services across the council to ensure that they have the right processes in place to ensure cases are monitored and resolved promptly, so that you're getting a better experience when you raise cases within the councillor portal. Moving on, we see quite a lot of potential in the system in terms of, well, the software platform in terms of what it could potentially do in the future. But in short, the more the system is used, the more development time that can be allocated to it for further improvements. And our focus is very much on it as a casework management tool at the moment, but we see plenty of potential for further development. So we see the sort of councillor portal as a bespoke area for each councillor, almost like an intranet for each councillor, where you can log into the system and you can see relevant data that relates specifically to you, your ward, and that kind of thing, pulling data through from other Derby City Council systems. So, for example, integration with the democracy portal that could theoretically show you, the list of upcoming committee meetings that you are scheduled to attend. Or could we, for example, pull information through from highway systems to show you about scheduled highways improvements in your wards? They're all things that we're exploring at the moment, and I don't want to overpromise at this point in time, but if there's information that you think it would be useful to see when you log into the councillor portal on your homepage, then let us know about it and we'll go away and see if it's feasible, because the council uses all manner of different software platforms and there's lots of data that is generated across their organisation, and if we could harness that, it could be a really powerful tool for you as councillors. As as I mentioned before, we're looking to introduce some improved functionality for reports and searches within the portal. Again, we really value councillors' input about the type of data you want to extract from the system that would really benefit your work. But in summary, I suppose I would say that we're seeking support from all councillors to make the system a success, and that it delivers the things that you need it to. It's designed and built for you. So if it's not working for you at the moment, please let us know, and we will seek to make change. Again, I've touched on this already to some extent, but there's a range of support and resources available to help you get to grips with the council portal. So we've got video guides published on the Democracy SharePoint page, shows you exactly how to raise and respond to a case, and the same type of support exists for Derby City Council services, so those colleagues who are using the portal to respond to councillors. We've included it as part of this year's councillor induction for the first time, and we saw, in fact, the month when most cases were raised in the portal was June, but we have seen a steady upward trend in numbers over the course of the year. So it's slowly going up, the number of cases raised in the portal month on month. And as I said earlier, we will hold one-to-one sessions with any councillor who wants direct support. I'd also urge councillors to keep an eye out for information about update and fixes to the portal that will be circulated via keeping in touch with councillors, bulletins, and any other correspondence that comes out from the team about Councillor Portal. So just to bring this presentation to a conclusion, as I said earlier, I think anecdotally aware that caseloads for many councillors are higher than ever, and there is that inherent tension with an organisation that is significantly smaller than it once was. And I think that places a collective obligation on both ourselves as a Democratic Services team and councillors to find ways of working that are appropriate to those challenges that are faced by the council. So we're quite eager to work with councillors to embrace new technology and find ways of working that are as modern and efficient as possible, and ultimately reduce any burden that we place on frontline services when we're raising cases and dealing with the day-to-day inquiries that are generated by councillors. Fully accept that the portal isn't perfect at this moment in time, and I'm sure there'll be councillors sitting in this room who've tried it and decided that maybe it isn't for them. But if you have feedback about it, please let us know. Please tell us what you want to see changed or improved, and we will go away and do our best to make it happen. And for those who do use it, please continue to do so. And as I said, for those who don't, just engage with us as a councillor support team and explain why it is that it's not for you, and there may be things that we can do to help. On this final slide, there are just some key contacts there who have been involved in the development of the councillor portal over a period of time. Very much a joint project between Democratic Services and our digital enablement and automation team. Lee's sadly not able to join us this evening, but he would, I'm sure, be happy to respond to any questions that you might have on the more technical side of things. Jodie is the manager who is responsible for the day-to-day monitoring of the councillor portal and supporting you as councillors to use it. And then we have Maureen and John who do a lot of work behind the scenes in terms of the routing and the forms and managing a lot of the data that's collected to make sure that it works as well as possible. And I hope that for those councillors who have come to us with issues, they've found a good response from those colleagues and who have been eager to help. So I think that brings everything to a close. I've rattled through that relatively quickly, but happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Alex. Councillor Repton, so you were chomping at the bit.
Yeah, it is now. Yeah, the initial feel is that it's less personal, more bureaucratic feel to this. I mean, I speak as a councillor with a really high caseload. I get dozens, literally dozens, a week. And I have a high turnaround rate to get the right people, get the right responses. And, you know, the proof of the pudding's in the eating. And so certainly I'd be reluctant to turn a winning formula into something that gets delayed. I want to know how the sausage machine works. And I want to compare it to what I did. I'll use the colourful case of horse shit on the temporary bridge at Darley, where I've had people report dog mess, but never horse crap on the new temporary bridge at Darley. I contacted Street Pride, it was removed within a few hours. If I fill this form in, who would pick it up? Where would it go? How long would it take? So there's horse crap on the bridge. I'm contacted by somebody, and I fill this portal in. Who would pick it up? Is it a machine picks it up? How many people does it go through? How much time does it take to actually deal with that horse shit compared to what I did and got the thing turned around and the horse shit removed?
Councillor Upton, we are live on the internet at the moment.
Sorry.
So I would
Right,
just,
okay. Horse manure. Sorry.
I think it's important to emphasise that I know that this board has looked at issues around AI and automation. There isn't that much automation actually involved in the councillor portal. So when a case is raised via a form, it will always be received by a human being in a service. And as I mentioned, built into the system are the corporate timescales that are associated with dealing with councillors' inquiries. So as I said, that's two working days for a.
I fill that form in.
Yeah.
About horse manure. I fill that form in about that horse manure on the bridge.
Yeah.
Who would pick that up? Is it because it's of the issue that it is? It's directed.
It will be direct. It would be directed to colleagues within our street pride team
By the words that one uses,
who are responsible for dealing with that type of issue in the city. Now, can I guarantee you that it would be just as quick as you phoning up a named officer who you may have worked with for several years? Yeah. Perhaps not, but I would challenge perhaps Councillor Epton that in those circumstances you are deriving a benefit from your many years and your experience as a councillor. You have grown to know those individuals within the council who can get something sorted for you quickly. Yeah, now, if perhaps, let's say, by contrast, you're a newly elected councillor and perhaps you're not familiar with that, the systems that exist within the council, you might not know who the most appropriate person to contact is or the particular team or individual. And this system is designed to help with that because all you need to do is, all you need to know is that you want to have some horse manure cleared up. That I can't claim that specific issue is listed in the councillor portal, but there'll be something broadly equivalent to it.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you for that response. Thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Alex, for the presentation. Obviously, as I use it quite a lot because being a new councillor, that's all I've known. So,
are you the 100 cases?
No, I don't know.
Never mind.
I've not gone to 100. I think it's very useful. It helps sort of councillors manage their casework. It also helps officers manage casework as well, because as you said, resources have reduced due to the financial situation of the council, and both yourself and Jodie have been receptive to sort of the feedback I've given, and which I'm glad about that. In terms of, you talked about short-term and long-term changes. Is the particular timescales when you're looking at sort of making those changes to the portal? Because one thing, as you've mentioned, is you can't add any, once you've logged the casework, you can't then add anything else because it's locked basically until the officer picks it up. So at the moment I have to have a spreadsheet with which I paste in the case number and then I add notes to that so I can update where I am with that particular piece of casework. I think also what I've mentioned in the feedback I've given is I think it'd be useful to have more alerts in terms of those 2 and 5 days. So if it isn't picked up, because at the moment if it's not, I've got to physically go in and look, and obviously as you said that member services also monitors it as well, where there could be a workflow that's added to automatically notice if a piece of casework hasn't been picked up, then it obviously can escalate it automatically rather than somebody going in to do that. In terms of, obviously, there's going to be a lot of data that's collated. Is there any plans from a corporate level to use that data in terms of to focus to improve services within the council? Yeah, and as I say, I think it's at the heart of any system that design should be the residents, and I think that's what's important. It's the system should be there to help deliver for the residents. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll take each of those points separately, if that's all right. In terms of timescales for development, some issues are more complex than others, and there are with some of the fixes and improvements, it will simply be a case of our digital services colleagues being able to allocate a developer who works in-house within the council to make some of those changes. Some of them are slightly more complicated and might require us to liaise directly with the software provider, and it might require them to make changes on their end. So I think all of the suggestions you've made are eminently sensible, and I think in most cases entirely achievable. But there is a bit of, some things could be resolved fairly quickly and other things might take a couple of months. But we are, as I said in the presentation, we meet fortnightly with the project team, and we want to, we are constantly tweaking and improving the system and releasing new versions of it effectively behind the scenes. So I think some of those changes will come through fairly quickly, and I would hope that by the spring we'll probably have a lot of those suggestions that you've made implemented. Our absolute priority is around changing the look and feel of that summary page that I talked about during the presentation. In terms of the things I talked about that were a bit more long-term and a bit more sort of potential for the future, I think a lot of that very much depends on the extent to which councillors embrace the system and use it. If it can be demonstrated that it's been being used frequently and councillors are deriving a benefit from it, then we will absolutely be able to justify investing more time and resources in developing it further and giving more information via the portal. So I think some things relatively short term, other things we're probably talking maybe a couple of years. But we do see a lot of potential for it in the longer term. In terms of that question around alerts for councillors, I think that now I'm not a technical person, but given that we are able to use the system to issue alerts, email alerts to officers who are overdue in responding, I'm almost certain it will be possible to issue email alerts to councillors to say you have a case coming up that is due a response. And also providing you with that, although the case has been allocated via an issue, letting you know which service is dealing with that issue is important, because if you don't get a positive experience, you can then at least escalate it. I think the use of data is an interesting one, and I think that as councillors, you inherently pick up a lot of interesting information that could be very insightful for the council and very powerful for the council as a tool. That being said, you are entitled as councillors to operate independently of one another, and I think it would have to be handled very sensitively and in consultation with councillors about how that data that is collected within the portal, which ultimately belongs to you as individual councillors, is then harnessed for the corporately. When I talk about reporting, what we are focusing on at this point in time is providing reports to you specifically as a councillor. So seeing the number of cases that you have raised and any trends and patterns that are emerging from your caseload. Clearly, there was a discussion to be had with councillors more broadly if there was an appetite for sharing information across wards, or there are inherently political tensions in some of that as well. So I think that's something that we need to think about a bit more carefully, and I wouldn't want to make any firm commitments on that right now.
Councillor Kaur, then Councillor Pandy.
Thank you for the presentation. Again, like Councillor Wilson, I'm a new councillor, so I can't really compare the before and after. I've only really used the portal for most issues I've had. But one thing, I think Councillor Wilson's touched on it a little bit, is the summary page, obviously. I too am having to do the same kind of thing where I write down the references, because when you kind of drop down to see what the summary of the issue is, it usually only shows the name of the person or the resident that you've put in. Now, sometimes, say if it's a case of fly tipping, etc., there might not be a resident that you want to go back to. So it's hard, even when you're looking through emails, if you've gone on a walkabout, you come home and you've logged lots of casework in one go, it's hard to go back and compare, well, which bit was that, which case number was this. And one thing I don't think has been mentioned so far is, you've mentioned already about being able to add to casework once it's already been logged on. I think that would be really, really useful. But the only other thing is, some council officers, when they reply on the portal, they might sign off with their name, or they might sign off with just their first name, but some don't at all. So if someone has replied back and you want to escalate the issue, or you feel like actually it's more pressing, perhaps I need to get in contact with the officer, I don't want to wait through the portal, it's hard to know who's replied to you. So you're almost having to raise it again and you don't know if that's going to the same person or a different person. You don't know which department it's come from sometimes, because you don't know which department your issue might have been allocated to. So I think that would be really useful to just have some consistency. So either the department or an email or just something at the bottom where, you know, this is who this has come from, and this is how you can come back to them if you don't feel like going back through the portal is going to be fast enough. So that would be my recommendation.
No, I think that they're all entirely valid comments, and they're an issue that we've become aware of as the portal has been used more, that actually things that we didn't necessarily think about when we were developing it in the first place. I think there are some training issues around how our colleagues around the council respond to issues within the portal. So it's been designed in such a way that when the response is provided to the service, the intention is that actually you can just take that response and then drop it into whatever correspondence that you are then issuing to the resident. But it's not always necessarily the case that that response is written in a format that you would want to then copy into an email or copy into a letter. So I think that's a training issue that we will take up with our colleagues around the organisation who are responding to casework on a regular basis. And I agree that having knowing who's dealing with your case is important. And whilst we would prefer, cases to remain self-contained within the portal, because ultimately then there is one record of how a customer contact, for want of a better word, is managed, there will inevitably be times when you actually need to pick up the phone or you need to speak to someone. So I think that's all entirely valid, and they're things that I'm happy to take back to the working group.
Fortunately, I don't have as much caseload as Councillor Repton. I got 2 Labour councillors in my ward. The problems I faced with the portal, I was using it quite a lot in the beginning. First of all, I think the council's website doesn't really go well with the username and password. Even as a resident, when I made the account with the council's website, and it just kept locking me out. And every time you have to reset the password and that kind of thing. With the councillor portal as well, it just logs you out every time. You again and again, you have to, every time you want to use it, especially in the phone, you have to log back in. I try to use it on the laptop, I'll see how it goes. But on the phone, it wasn't that easy to use. And then I agree with Councillor Kaur that on the summary, you just can't make out if that can be rectified. I would be using it now, now we have done the presentation, so I will try to use it more and more. But I think if we can get the search thing sorted, then it'll be easy to pick up, because on the email, you just have to put the search and then you can go back to that case. Whereas there was no means of doing that on the councillor portal. But I'll definitely go to the portal.
Thanks, Councillor Pandy. No, I think I'd agree with you in terms of improving the search functionality and the layout of that summary page. Happy to take a look at the specific issue you have with your phone. I recall that there was some complication between the interaction between your registration as a customer of the council on the customer account and also your councillor account. So I think that was a slightly challenging interaction for our IT colleagues, but I think it's one we might take away outside the meeting and have a look at it for you.
Councillor Repton?
Yeah, you regard me as a critical friend with regard to this, because I'm still not 100% convinced, but maybe that's something to do with my age and the number of years I've been a councillor. But I mean, could this system eventually replace councillors? The need to have councillors altogether, because why don't we encourage just, why not cut out the middleman? Why not just encourage people to fill in this for themselves and direct them? Why go through a councillor? Why not go directly from the person who's got the issue straight through to the officers, through this portal and back again? I mean, so the question is, could the system replace councillors, Alex?
No, I think is the answer to that. I don't think it can replace councillors. And as I said at the start, there will always be a need for that human interaction between you and your residents, and the fact that you as councillors are what give this organisation its democratic accountability. That's not going anywhere anytime soon. And this system is it's not designed for the public to fill out. It's for you as councillors to collect and manage your casework, and it creates that sort of feedback loop, for want of a better description, that allows you to quickly and easily raise cases on behalf of your residents, get a response from services, and then communicate the outcome back to them.
So if there's any Luddites amongst our midst, there's no need to break the looms at this stage?
Absolutely not, no.
I saw a question around the obviously the feedback we've received tonight, and you referenced in your presentation about just ongoing feedback from councillors and these fortnightly development sessions, which I must admit I haven't seen advertised. I probably have missed it if they are. But with you sort of approaching this period of end of year review, whether it's worth getting this added on to one of our all-councillor briefing meetings, or actually just sending out a dedicated feedback form to all councillors via email, just to try and encourage a bit more, general feedback on top of what you've already been receiving, what you've heard tonight.
Yeah, I think a survey would be really helpful, and that's something we're happy to take away, and I think get some feedback from councillors, both those who use the system and those who've chosen not to. Just to be clear, the development sessions, that's an officer group in that we meet with between Council and Civic Support and IT Services fortnightly. We did have when the councillor portal was in its earlier stages of development, there was a councillor working group who contributed to it, but that would have been a couple of years ago now. But we'd be happy to re-establish something like that if there was an appetite for it, and perhaps that's a question we could ask via the survey.
Cheers. And I just had one other question around when you touched on targets and certain service areas potentially struggling to meet targets at times. Is there a particular service area of the council that has been struggling with responding to resolving cases, not just within the target time frame, but in general?
No, I wouldn't say that, and we don't maintain a sort of league table of services within the council in terms of who responds to cases quickly enough or whatever. But we do when I think most of the time it's probably down to those services where maybe there's high turnover of staff, lots of colleagues dealing with the same issue, for example. So there's really big services, and it's just about helping them to ensure that they have the right processes in place within their teams to make sure that the notifications from the portal are going to a shared inbox, for example, and not going to a named officer who's away on leave or absent. And working with heads of service and managers across the organisation to make sure that that's embedded. And as I said, everyone's been very supportive, and there wouldn't be a service that I would want to name and shame.
Councillor Wilson.
Thanks. Sorry, just picking up what you just said. So does it all go to a generic email box, or is it?
No, not necessarily. Some services choose to use shared mailboxes. Others have 4 or 5 different colleagues all set up within the portal. We are talking to we're working with IT to embed it in the council starters and leavers process as well. So when a new employee joins the council, or when someone leaves the council, there is an online form where you select which systems you have access to, and just so we're notified, so that we wouldn't be left in a situation where several colleagues all left in quick succession and suddenly cases were being fired off into the ether and no one responding to them. So that's something that we're working on, and it's, I would say, in almost every case, there are, in every category of issue, there are at least 3, either a shared mailbox or 3 officers who would be allocated to that case, just so you've got that level of resilience.
Yeah, because I've noticed that some respond fairly within the 2 days, and then others sometimes don't get a response, so then I have to obviously chase it with member services. That's it.
Any more? Great. All right. Well, thank you, Alex and Jodie, for coming along this evening for the in-depth presentation. Really appreciate it. Hopefully, might get a few more of us on using the portal, like Councillor Pandy. I'm going to go away and try and get on it a bit more. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. No problem.
Moving on to item 7, which is our work programme moving forward. So as I mentioned at the start of the meeting, we did have an item that was due to be on the agenda tonight, which was looking at our sort of customer complaints management. That's now been added to the following meeting, which I believe is our last meeting, 7th of March for our last meeting. So yeah, I think with the customer complaint side of stuff and also having AI on there as well, those two will work quite well, because I'm sure we've seen recently quite a bit of coverage in the media around AI and some of the issues there. Yeah, Councillor Wilson.
And because obviously we're the corporate services and cost of living scrutiny board. Is could we do something on the cost of living, sort of a few schemes that support residents? I don't know if that would be a topic, whether we've got enough time or space on the agenda for the next meeting.
I mean, I'm happy to go away and have a look. I know we did cover some stuff, I think, at the first meeting, excuse me, around the cost of living. I'm happy to take it offline with you after this meeting, and we can, you know, if there's something in particular that you wanted to look at, maybe getting added to the agenda, then sure, we can look at that.
Yeah, I think it's more because obviously reviewing, obviously from the winter months, because when's the next meeting? Is it March? Yeah, because obviously it'll be reviewing sort of the support that's, and whether it's been, I don't know, it's just an idea.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's a fair comment. Coming through the back end of winter, so yeah, we'll take that away. We can have a chat about that. Great. Okay. Well, thank you all. Have a good Christmas.